And I said, "Oh, Mrs. Parks." I didn't have, any information to pick her up. I didn't know she's on that flight. And I said, "Listen, I have to pick you up, so you just wait right here. I'm coming to pick somebody else up." So while we were waiting, she said, "I didn't bring the right clothing. I get kind of cold in these air-conditioned environments, so you think you could find me a wrap?" And I said, "Oh, of course." I said, "There's a store right a block from the hotel where we're staying, and I'll go there and get your wrap. As soon as we get in, I'll go get you something." And sure enough, I did. I went to the store, had money in my pocket, and found a nice wrap I thought would serve a purpose. So the lady, the waitress, I mean, not the clerk, she was busy, and I thought she was just busy with the display shelf. And I thought she saw me because I was the only person there, but she didn't stop. And finally I said, "Miss," try to get her attention. She looked around, didn't stop. So I said, "Miss, I'm ready for my purchase." And she said, "You people make me sick. You know you don't belong here." Now, we got the Public Accommodations Act, so I did belong there. But she said, "You people," and that's another thing that gets you, "you people." I said, "Miss, I have money to pay for this item, and I'd like to pay for it." Exasperation just took over. "You people just make me sick." Well, I could have dealt with that. I could have argued with her and fought with her. But I went there to buy something, had the money, paid for it, and walked out. And on the way back, here I hear again, "You don't belong here." I found every step of the way I was running into that. And I just said, when the law comes, has it really made a difference? No, because the law doesn't change every person's attitude. It just now gives you the right to belong there. So I was in the right place because I belong there. But I haven't changed her heart. And Dr. King said so effectively, "Until and unless you change a man's heart, you may never change his behavior." So we got to change their hearts in order to change their behavior. So we hadn't gotten to her then. But I knew then that that law was going to make it okay for me to belong there. I may not be treated right, but I belong there.
Was there any point for you where you were scared, "This is over for me"?
Not really. Because I was looking for a home. Mahalia Jackson, who was very famous, gospel singer, well known, wanted to buy another house she owned. She wasn't moving, she just wanted another house. Saw this house, and so she told me in my movements would I look for something for her. Well, I was in California, just a house that I knew she would like, and had a sign out front, "For sale." And I just went up and rang the doorbell and asked the man the silly question like, "Is the house for sale?" I guess he said, "Can you read?" But it was kind of an odd everything because, yes, I could read, and it did say "for sale," and he said it wasn't sale, he had just sold it, Well, I said, "Well, why don't you move the sign?" Well, now you're going to have an argument, and then you've got a fight on your hands. You keep going every day. It's not over yet, Roland. Even today, we got the laws, and I was there when a lot of them were passed. I've seen them and worked through it and fought through it and helped ownership of some of the legislation. But we haven't changed everybody's heart yet, so I still run into it. And so there's not a moment when
You saw up close the personal toll it took. It was a lot for civil rights leaders to have to carry. How did they deal with just all of that? Laughter? music, camaraderie? Was it, even in those cases, still that private pain when you read books and you hear them talk about Dr. King and depression? I just finished reading Nick Cott's book on Judgment Days, and he wrote about him and LBJ, these two iconic figures, and what they personally battled. I've talked to others, and they talked about for many of them, there were lonely moments as well. These are folks who were in their 20s, who were changing the world. That's a lot to bear.
Well, but you know, I was very close to Dr. King. I used to hear he just loved President Johnson. They had a nice love affair up to a certain point. But Martin, and I can call him that, you know, I know this is a public program, but I feel a kinship to him because we had a close relationship. But he was a composite of all that. He had some moments that were lonely. Every week on a Tuesday morning, he took time off. He had a location that was secret, and he would go there and just get in his pajamas and stay all day and commune with nature and commiserate about, you know, what he's planning to do, would like to do. But he did it alone. He was there all day, and the only time we would intrude is like he would call and ask me to, say, bring him some lunch. Or he had some papers that had to be signed. We'd take them to him, but didn't bother him on those personal days. He was gathering his thoughts and just communing. And yet, I saw a different kind of lonely, and that he was alone. He wasn't lonely, he was alone on those prescribed dates. But I saw him near the end of his life. He died a very depressed man because he had made that speech about Vietnam.
April 4th, 1967,
Yes,
Riverside
exactly,
Church, Beyond Vietnam.
And it seemed like his world shut down. People stopped giving. Even his friends who you could count on for money just dried up.
Black folks.
Oh, yes.
Approval numbers low.
He said, you know, I think he couldn't get a handle on it. He just said, I can understand your enemies not supporting you. They don't believe in you anyway. But your friends? He said, I thought everybody who knew me knew that I couldn't cope with war. You know, there is no victory in war, he used to say. And when he saw those children on the TV in Vietnam, he said, now I've got to speak. You know, children being bombed with that napalm stuff. He said, I've got to do something. And he then spoke out and lost everybody. And it really, really bothered him to the very end. And if you remember reading, on his last birthday, he was here in Atlanta, and they were having a meeting over at Ebenezer Church planning a strategy for the next movement. And there was a film crew here to just follow him, doing a documentary on him for Italy television. And they called me, they meaning Andy Young and Reverend Abinez and all of them called and said, you know, we haven't seen him laugh for a long time. And we've just decided you're the only person who we think can make him laugh. So will you come over to the church at a certain time? And let's just have today was his birthday. And I said, oh, I need a little more time. Anyway, not making the story too long, I agreed to go. Mm-hmm. When the meeting broke, he started out to the men's room and said, hey, Doc, come back. Now, the television crew is getting all of this, you know, because they're following his movements. So he sat down, and I said, listen, this is your birthday. And so I pulled out of a little sack I had, a little tin cup. It was gold, but it was the beggar's cup, what people used to call it. And he said, I said to him, you're always trying to help President Johnson with the war on poverty. So I want you to take this cup and go stand on the corner wherever you travel and get some money for President Johnson. And he just smiled. He laughs. He laughs. And I said, and also, you go to jail so much, I'm going to give you these potato chips. So the next time you go, you'll have something to snack on, and he falls out laughing. Well, Roland, when they got ready to do a movie on him after his death, they couldn't find any footage of him laughing. And so this footage became the most valuable footage. It's now still used. They use it out on the prize and use it now for lots of things. But it was the first time he had laughter on his countenance for months. He died of a broken heart because he could not understand how people couldn't support his view on Vietnam, killing people. Now, I tell you that story because the man was mixed with, he was such a humorist. I mean, in private, there's nobody funnier. I even said to him one time, I said, you know, you don't have to worry about the future in a job. When you solve all the problems of the world, you can go on stage by being a comedian. He was the funniest man ever. Everybody agreed to that, those who were privileged to be in private moments with him. He'd tell a joke and get an inflection, just like the one story he's telling. And he was very, very, very funny. Filled with humor, loved to play. He'd come home from a trip, and he and his children, the first thing he wanted to do was play with the kids. And they had an awful game that Mrs. King just couldn't stand. And the game was they'd pull up a chair, the little ladder, climb on top of the refrigerator. And then the game goes, Martin's on the floor, and they're leaping into his arms. Now, that's real faith that your dad's going to catch you. And they had a kiss spot. You know, with 4 children, everybody had a spot. And he would catch the kid and then kiss him, and always he'd kiss the wrong spot. Daddy, no, Daddy, that's the wrong spot. Oh, and then they'd have a fight over the wrong spot. And they would just fill the kitchen with laughter. Mrs. King didn't like her. She figured they were going to kill themselves. But I saw in that picture faith in their father, faith that they could leap down and he would catch them. Having the father in the house, playing the game, getting the kiss spots, that was more pleasure for him than it was for them. It was pleasure for all. So to see him in the years that he lived, filled with the laughter, and then see him go out of the world with the sadness bothers me.
You mentioned that last year. Again, I've watched numerous documentaries, read numerous books. And I tell people, I don't care what anyone tells me, there is no coincidence that he dies on April 4th, 1968. A year to the day.
That was something.
After giving that speech. He was troubled for a few years over Vietnam. Diane Nash, James Bevel, and others were pushing him on it. Did he ever talk with you, or when you listen to the debates back and forth, as he struggled with that issue? Because he had to have known the moment he took that stance, he's opposing LBJ. He's opposing, I mean, he's laying it all on the line once he says, enough is enough with this war.
Well, I had a chance to be around him, kind of know his thinking. And so I'll go out on the limb by saying I think he did, because he reached points in his life where, well, whatever I lose, I lose. I've got to take the stand. He was willing to take the stand that he felt was the right position on an issue, regardless. It didn't matter to him what the consequences were at the time he's going to take the stand. So I knew that he probably knew that there was going to be a price to pay. I don't think he knew the extent the price was. I don't think he knew that everybody was going to turn against him.
And he takes this stance, and his wife has no choice but to go along with it, and his decision has a direct impact on her and their children.
Oh, yeah.
Because he put it all on the line.
Well, but he told her, and see, I drove him to the airport to go to Memphis, but he said to me that he felt like the country was at a point now where it was not ready for change. that all the change we've made is about all we're going to get. And so when he comes back from Memphis, he said, when I come back from this trip, Coretta and I are going to take a year off to go to India again. We got to retool. That wasn't his language. But he said, we've got to start again. Now, what was the problem with that is that SCLC was already in the planning stages for the
Poor People's Campaign.
Poor People's Campaign.
His idea.
Mm-hmm. But he told me he wasn't going to go. He was going to abandon the idea. He was leaving when he came back. He was going to India. Now, there are those who differ. I don't say that a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm taking a stand now to tell you this on television because I didn't express that to everybody because I saw it wasn't well received. But that's the truth. And so I'm telling you now the truth. The planners of the march didn't want to hear it because there was, you know, you got to have some movement after he's no longer here. You got to have some action-filled programmatic thrust. Otherwise, you're going to die. So that was a bold statement, but he told it to me. Now, I have no way of knowing whether he really meant it. I believe he meant it because he didn't joke a lot about his plans. I think he meant it. He said, the country now is not right for what we're doing, and I've got to make a switch.
You dropped him off at the airport, and he gets out. As you think back, have you, I'm sure you have you just went back and just played every part of that? What he had on, what he said, last look, all of those things. Because that was the last time you saw him alive.
Yeah. But let me tell you what happened. The day before I was at their home, Mrs. King was convalescing from recent illness, and she was there. Mother-in-law, well, Martin's mother was there, Martin and I. After dinner, we were playing the piano. He's a great singer, and I played the piano. He said, I bet you didn't know I could sing. I said, well, I heard you could. No, I didn't know you could. He said, well, I know you can play. So sit down at the piano.
You majored in music in college.
Yeah, yeah. So we had such fun. We were singing and, just having a great time. When we separated, the evening ended, I went home and told him I'd pick him up the next morning, whatever time established. But Mama King called me that night about 11:30, and she said, I know you're taking ML to the airport tomorrow, but tell him something for me. Said, just like that fun we had today, I'd like to have more days like that. I know I'm the mother and I have to understand he's busy, but you see to it and tell him I want him to plan more fun time for family hour. Will you do that for me? I said, of course. Well, I told him. I said, now your mother called me, and I told her she wants more of your time, and we're going to see that you do that. Well, guess what? About 3 or 4 o'clock Atlanta time, because Memphis was an hour behind us, he called her. Talked to her about an hour and a half. She said it never happened before. Could you take your mother for granted? He knew she was going to be there. She was supportive of her. The son loved him dearly. But he didn't bother to call her. But when I saw her that first time that night, because I went over to check on them, she said, listen, when this pain subsides a little bit, I'm going to tell you how much I appreciate what you did. Because he told me you told him what I said. And that prompted him to call, and they had a big laugh about, here's the call. And he knew, I think, because he called his brother. He'd never done that before. Called him on the phone, I understand, talked a good time with him. He did a lot of odd things. I talked to him, and he said to me, why does my room number sound so familiar to you? I mean, to me, he said. And I said, I don't know, because I don't know what room you're in, because we had switched hotels. And he said, it's 306. And I said, well, that's my house number. And I said, you've been here enough, so I guess you make it the relation. That all of these things were odd things that happened that day.
April 4th.
Uh-huh. It was early in the day. He called me. And then it called his mother, called his brother, and Andy said they were playing pillow talk. I mean, pillow throwing, whatever.
After he came back from court,
yeah,
came in
and they
had
played,
a pillow fight.
Yeah. And so he did a lot of things that day that were unusual, I understand. I wasn't there, I was here. But he did a lot of unusual things, a lot of unusual things. Oh, I tell you something else that was most unusual. Coretta's favorite gift is red roses. And every birthday, her birthday's in April. April 27th is her birthday. Now he left on, was March, I guess, when he left Atlanta. Mm-hmm. He bought her some artificial flowers and left them in the library of the house. And he told her to go get the flowers. And no, he told the housekeeper to tell him, when he leaves, go get those flowers out of the library. She was angry. He said, did you get those roses? So she said, yes, but I'm mad about it. He said, why? He said, because they're artificial. And guess what he said to her? I didn't know whether I would be here on your birthday or not, but I wanted your roses to be here. Now, he died, that was April 4th. Well, that was April 3rd when he talked to her. Her birthday's April 27th. Mm. He said, I don't know whether I will be there in person for your birthday, so, but here are your red roses. You know, she kept those roses a long time. Mm-hmm.
6:01 p.m., April 4th. Shots ring out. How do you find out?
I was having dinner with the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. And the maitre d' knew my relationship with the Kings, and she came over to the table and gave me a note. Well, we were talking. I was busy talking, and she said, did you hear about Dr. King? And I just folded up the note and kept talking. She thought that was odd. She came back a second and she said, I hate to interrupt your meal. She said, but I just heard on the radio he'd been shot. Well, that didn't bother me either because I'd been in his presence before when it was reported. We were in Los Angeles once. They reported that he had been shot. And we were in there getting ready for a nice, comfortable evening and a meal. Well, not just he and I, but, you know, several of us were together. We had a big laugh about it. That they said, I think the guy had 8 sticks of dynamite and said, I think I got him, you know. We saw it on TV. So I didn't think anything about it. I just talked to him earlier that day, and, you know, so he was all right then. And I said, well, maybe I better go to the phone. I went to the telephone, and their private lines were busy. And that's unusual, all the lines to be busy. And I said to my guest, I think I'd better go over there. So I then drove over. And as I was getting to her driveway, she was backing out. The mayor was there and the police. They were taking her to the airport. And she said, oh, I've been trying. She left the window down, but it was raining. She said, I've been trying to reach you. I've got to go to Memphis, said, and she had a housekeeping staff, but she knew I had a special relationship with the children. Said, will you check on the children for me? I don't know what's going to happen. Because see, when they called her, they didn't they didn't tell her he was killed. They told her he'd been shot and injured.
So when you're driving up, you still think it's not true?
Well, I think something must have happened.
Right. Once as I said, but as you're driving over, you're going, okay, we've heard this before. Let me drive over.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
But then when you turn that corner and then you see police and the mayor, that's when it hits you.
There's something.
Okay, something happened.
Something did happen. Mm-hmm.
And so you pull up. She rolls the window down, but she doesn't know that he's gone.
That's right. She didn't know it. And it wasn't until she got to the airport that she got the call that, and I think the mayor got the call that he is gone. And so Martin's secretary was there at the airport to join her. And they went to the ladies' room, and that's when she got the real official word. And then she came back home.
So you're in the house with the children.
And I stayed. I didn't leave there until 5 days later, 6 days later.
You know he's gone. Did you wait for her to return to tell them, or they made aware, the children?
Oh, I would never, not even consider telling the children. She came shortly, I guess, after, well, I guess they could speed, but she came. It didn't take her long to get to the house, and she came in telling her staff and everybody. And by now, the house is filling up because everybody else now has heard. But she said to her staff, "Do not tell my children. I'll do that myself." And so her bedroom was at the end of the long hall in the house. So she decided to make that her solace. And then the people up front would answer the phone and then direct the call back to see if she would take, and I'd be the interceptor. I just stayed with her. But she got ready to go tell the boys, and she asked me to go with her. And she had a death grip on my arm, tightly, trying to tell the children. She told Dexter first, the younger boy, that, your dad has been seriously hurt. She couldn't bring herself. She said, your dad's been hurt. Well, how bad is he hurt? She said, pretty badly, I understand. But we'll talk about it later, but, he's not coming home. And I've got a lot of things to do. And he said, well, if he's hurt bad, and he jumped out of his bed. He said, if he's hurt badly, why are you still here? You all do everything together. Why are you still here? And he was chastising her. And she said, oh, well, got a lot of decisions to make. And she was calmly still holding me so tightly. And then we went to the other side of the room, which was the other boy's side, Martin. And she told him, he was older, so she said, it's pretty serious. And so we got a lot of decisions to make. I don't know what we're going to do first, but it looks like he's very, very serious.
She still can't say.
She couldn't say it. She couldn't say it. And he said, well, what must I tell my children? My friends at school tomorrow. So she said, well, you're not going to go to school, so you won't have to worry about that. And he leaped up. What do you mean? I have to go to school. Miss Davis said to be no cutting her classes. And I laughed later, not at that moment, but I said, that teacher put cutting these classes. But she finally got out of the room, and then she had a sigh of relief, that she finally had told them. Now, Bernice was too little. She was only like 4, I think, and didn't understand. But Yolanda came in, and she sat on her mother's bed right beside her, and they embraced, crying, like, we're big girls, we're not going to cry. Daddy wouldn't want us to cry, so we're not going to cry, Mommy. We're going to pull this thing together. The two of us can do this. And they are wailing. The most poignant moment, that was a difficult moment for me, and I guess I was crying too, because they were just embracing tightly, saying, we're not going to cry. We're not going to cry. So they finally said, okay, we're gonna work this thing out. As the calls were coming in, I assumed Mrs. King would want to talk to the president. And so, you know his voice, so I would take the call and said, okay, Mrs. King, this is President Johnson. But what was interesting, everybody had the same message. And it's the same one maybe you and I make, like someone dies, she said, if I can do anything, let me know. And meeting it, anything you need me to do, let me know. If there's anything I can do. Mm-hmm. Everybody had the same message except one call. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. His call was the one that was different. He said, Mrs. King, it's obvious. Now, when he called, it was, now see, in Atlanta it was about 5 or 6-ish, and people started calling. And so up until now, it's almost 10. Mr. Kennedy said, it's obvious, Mrs. King, that you need more telephone lines because I've been trying to get you ever since the news broke. But Mr., and I'll make up a name because I don't remember the name, but Mr. John Jones is en route to Atlanta now to install 9 telephone lines for you. He'll be there at 12:30 tonight. He's en route now. I also heard on the TV that you'd perhaps want to go pick your husband up in Memphis. So we've dispatched a plane. It's already there in Atlanta. The pilot's name is Sam Smith, tailgate number 12345, telephone number 820. So whenever you want to go, all you have to do is make this call. He will take you, and he's in readiness whenever you want to go to Memphis. Also, who's your point person? And she told I was going to be her lead spokesperson. And he said, Xernona, call every hotel in the city of Atlanta, talk to the management, and put a clamp on all the rooms in the hotel, in the city, that people will be coming to this funeral who are heads of states, and we got to be sure we have the right allocation of space. And my team will be there tomorrow morning, and we're going to set up an office at 123 Maple Street, and we will help govern things. He just laid everything out, and we followed his rules.
Because he had been through it.
Mm-hmm. He said, we know how, we've got experience in this. We know what we're doing. And he was right. And I was there when Jacqueline Kennedy came, which was the expected moment. Two things happened. I don't know, you got time for me to tell all this? Before I tell you about Mrs. Kennedy, I'm going to tell you about Nixon. He wasn't president at that point. He was the
Republican candidate.
Yeah, the candidate for Republican. He called our newspaper publisher and said, I know Dr. King's feelings on me, but do you think you could help arrange for me to come visit Mrs. King? My wife and I want to come make a call on her. And he said, no, I can't do it, but I've got a very good friend who's at her house, and he was talking about me, and she will tell me whether you can or not, so let me get in touch with her, and then I'll call you back. So he called me, and I said, I don't know, I have to run it by her. Well, when I told her that, in the house there were people who said, oh, no, Dr. King would want to see him, and so they talked to her, saying, no, why don't you say no? Well, I had her last ear, so I said, Mrs. King, this is not a time for politics. Why don't you let him come? But let's lay some ground rules. No entourages, no press, no nothing. Just come. If he's making a personal call, then he personally can call on her. So she bought my advice and agreed. Called Mr. McGill and told him and said we wanted him to come unannounced. And sure enough, he came. But guess what happened? He came up, and we knew what time. They told us all the way. He's at the airport now. He's on his way. So we knew when to expect him. And when he came here, I went to the door, the front of the house. He came in a beige, I don't know cars, but like also a Chevrolet, something like that. It wasn't a fancy, I don't want to offend anybody, but it was a small car. And I ushered him in. Well, he was by himself, but he said, Mrs. Nixon was coming, but he said they got a call that one of the girls got sick and she had to rush to New York. He said, so he sat by her bed, that's where she received her gift. She said, on her bed, we had a chair, and he sat there face to face and told him he knew how Dr. King felt. He said, but this is not a political call. My wife and I were coming, and he went on to tell why she knew. He said, I have brought with me a check, a personal check, that we are feeling the grief And because we are Americans, we have to take some responsibility for this. So as our personal expression of sympathy, we want to educate all 4 of your children. And this check that we have here will cover their expenses wherever they go. There's enough money to educate all 4 children. Nobody knows that story because I haven't told it but a few times. Then we were told that Mrs. Kennedy was coming, and then the day she was due, she said she couldn't make it. Then we got another call. She said now she does want to come. She said, I don't have the strength to make it.
Because she had to release, she knew the pain of Coretta Scott King.
You're getting my script ahead of me, because what happened is she finally came. And as I said, you know, describing, you can get the picture of the house. The front door was up there. Coretta's bedroom was at the end of the hall. When she came, they told me she was here, so I went to greet her to bring her back. Roland, those 2 women didn't say one word to each other, verbal word, no word. Neither said hello. They didn't say anything. They embraced. That seemed like 20 minutes. Of course, it wasn't that long. But they embraced without a spoken word for an endless period of time. But you don't have to be smart to read their lips and their heart. The heart was saying, we know what you're feeling. You know, I know, we know. That was the most poignant moment, and it was the one time that I cried because I was feeling their language.
It has to be hard for you because here you are. You go to the home. You're with the kids. She comes back. She asks you to be with her when she tells the children. You have to be her rock.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't grieve. You can't break down. You can't. You're taking the phone calls. You're doing. So how are you? Did you just sort of just go like Kid Robert Kennedy? You just went right into work mode?
Oh, yeah. Because I'm not even sure that I ever cried, come to think of it. I'm saying later, but I never got a chance to grieve. Because one of the things when she was trying to decide whether she's going to go to Memphis, and then right away I said, oh, gee, she needs clothes, because I wanted her to look